Hi, we're going to be reading the story called The Good Samaritan. Before we read it, we're going to backtrack a little bit to take a look at the vocabulary and good habits that you should develop to help understand stories that you read. So let's back up first to the vocabulary. So here on page 10, you should have already been working with the vocabulary that we have for this story. This is the first story in the cluster, but there are others as well. And remember, these highlighted yellow words, you'll see them highlighted in the story, but the story also does have other vocabulary that it shows at the bottom. This story introduces some Spanish words, and they'll be shown in italics, so the words will go sideways a little bit. So hopefully you've reviewed these in the Quizlet set already. And now let's talk about what you should do before reading. And hold on, there we go, a little bit bigger here. So you need to analyze the plot. And plot is the sequence of events in a story. Story starts with the exposition, so it kind of gives you preparation of what's going to happen. It tells you who the characters are in the story and the setting, where the story takes place, and the time that it takes place. Not talking about necessarily time of day, it's letting you know, is it a modern story? So it's not just specific to hours and seasons. It tells you a little bit more than that. Now, every story, every plot has the exposition. It also has a conflict, which is the main problem that the characters face. There are complications, which are events that make the conflict worse and lead to the climax. Complications in a story also make it more interesting. The climax is the turning point. Now, climax usually means like the highest point, and you'll see this maybe in a plot, drawing of what a plot works with. And it's the turning point or the most important event of the story. And after the climax, you have the resolution as the story ends and the problem is solved. Or not. But different stories happen different ways. So here we're looking at the text, and we've got the characters making an agreement here. Mr. Sanchez told us, if you help clean up the yard, you boys can use the pool anytime you want, so long as one of us is here. After a hard day's work cleaning his yard, I so looked forward to taking a dip. I'd even worn my trunks under my work clothes. And then Mr. Sanchez said, come by tomorrow. I don't want you fellas to track all this dirt into the pool. So you had an understanding. And what Mr. Sanchez says here at the end, how might this statement lead to a conflict between the characters? Why might this create a problem? I mean, just imagine you were told you could do something, you're expecting to do it, and then you're told you can't do it. How would you feel? So when you're reading, your focus strategy should be to plan and monitor. Monitor is paying attention. So most stories include characters who have a conflict that will be resolved or fixed in some way. Events almost always lead up to a climax. Use this information to plan your reading. So as you read, you're making predictions. As you read something, you're imagining yourself in the story a lot of the time. I mean, I'm sure all of us, we've done something where, we've done some hard work and then we're looking forward to something that was promised to us after the hard work. How would you feel if that promise was broken? So as you read, make predictions or guesses about what will happen later in the story's plot. So let's take a look at the bottom. One way for you to make predictions, the story's title, The Good Samaritan. Well, we know what good is, but what's a Samaritan? Maybe that's something you need to look up. Look at the art and the quotations that are in large type. So they might give you clues about the story's events. Make predictions. Put clues together and predict what will happen next and what the characters will do or how they will change. Also, confirm or change predictions. So here we've got a prediction chart on the side. As you read, notice details that either confirm your prediction, yep, I was right, or make you change your mind. Oh, this happened. Well, I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So you can do this on a piece of paper just to get started and get into the habit of doing this then naturally in your head as you read a story. So let's move on. This story is written by Rene Saldana Jr. And he was a teenager who never thought he'd be a writer. I wonder how many of you are in that same boat, what your future will hold for you. So he became an English teacher, and today he's a college professor. Now, here in the middle, he says the Good Samaritan is about a boy becoming an adult. So he says his first book was about a teenage boy struggling with what it means to be a real man. And The Good Samaritan is about that same boy becoming an adult. He is learning his own place in the world, and he's realizing that he is part of a community. No man is an island. Nobody is all by themselves. What we are influenced by our community. What our community does affects us, and what we do affects our community. Our communities can be small, a circle of friends, a family, or larger, depending upon the activities that we do. So, the Good Samaritan. So, The Good Samaritan by Rene Saldana. So here we've got a clue. People are shaking hands. They do this when they meet each other, but sometimes when there is an agreement about something, people shake hands as a promise. Sorry, let me get caught up. I'm reading from my iPad, so that's why I keep looking down. Set a purpose. Find out how Ray feels about his neighbors, the Sanchez's. So right away, you're going to start thinking, well, who are my neighbors? What do I think of them? There are good neighbors and not so good neighbors. I know he's in there, I thought. I saw the curtains of his bedroom move. Only a little, yes, but they moved. Yesterday, Orly told me, come over tomorrow. We'll hang out by the pool. I rang the doorbell again. Then I knocked. The door creaked open. The afternoon light crept into the dark living room inch by inch, or inch by slow inch. Mrs. Sanchez, Orly's mom, stuck her head through the narrow opening, her body hidden behind the door. Hi, Ray. How can I help you? Well, already I'm thinking, okay, Opening the door. Have you seen that? You open the door and you're just a little bit, that's not welcoming you in. If somebody wants you to come in, they open the door wide, come in. But here, she's got her body blocking the door. So already I'm getting a very go away vibe about this. Mrs. Sanchez, is Orlando here? I tried looking past her, but only saw a few pictures hanging on the wall. One of the Sanchez family, all dressed up, fancy and smiling, standing in front of a gray marble background. No, he's not. He went with his father to mission. Oh, because Orlando told me he would, because Orlando said he would be here, and he told me to come over. They won't be back until later tonight, she said. You can come by tomorrow and see if he's here. You know how it is in the summer. He and his dad are always doing work here and there. Come back tomorrow, but call first. Sure, come back anytime, but call first. Yeah, you call first, you let them know you're coming, and then they're not going to be there. Yeah, right. It's just that he said I could come by and swim in your pool. Dijo. Tomorrow, come over. I'll be here. We'll go swimming. I'm sorry he told you that, but without him or my husband here, you won't be able to use our pool, me dijo Mrs. Sanchez. Okay, I said. Maybe tomorrow? Yeah, maybe. So here we've got this 1 at the bottom, and that takes you back to this question up here. Based on what you've read so far, which characters do you predict might become involved in a conflict? Add this to your prediction chart. So there are 2 characters that we've met, the narrator and Mrs. Sanchez. There are also 2 characters we haven't met but who've been mentioned here. The rest of Mrs. Sanchez's family, her husband, Mr. Sanchez, and her son, Orlando, or Orly. Now, remember what I said about the vocabulary. I'll show you the key vocabulary here, but there are a few other things here. And this is where I was telling you, we have some Spanish words in this story. We've got dijo, which means he said, or she said, and me dijo Mrs. Sanchez. Mrs. Sanchez told me. Okay, so what's your prediction? Good neighbor, bad neighbor? Let's move on. But there was no maybe about it. I wouldn't be coming back because I knew Orlando was in the house. He just didn't want to hang out. Bien codo con su pool. Plain stingy and tricky. This guy invited me and a few others over all summer to help his dad with some yard work because Mr. Sanchez told us, if you help clean up the yard, you boys can use the pool anytime you want, so long as one of us is here. And we cleaned up his yard. On that hot day, the water that smelled of chlorine looked delicious to me. And after a hard day's work cleaning his yard, I so looked forward to taking a dip. I'd even worn my trunks under my work clothes. Then Mr. Sanchez said, come by tomorrow. I don't want you fellas to track all this dirt into the pool. So here we have number 2 comprehension question about the language. Authors use language in ways that help us picture words. What does this paragraph help you see, hear, smell, taste, or touch? And that's an important thing when you start doing your own writing. It makes things more interesting when you put the 5 senses into it like that. So he's talking about water that smelled of chlorine. But he says, so he's talking about a smell, but he says it looked delicious. When you talk about delicious, which sense are you using? What does delicious make you think of? It makes me think of food. Thinking of, food that you enjoy eating. It's delicious. It's so satisfying. So it's an interesting way to talk about it. And, describing it's the summer. Summer weather in the northern hemisphere, hot. So definitely a pool, the water cool you down, delicious. Also, using the picture cues. So the two shadows in this photo appear to be tilted. And what does this composition make you think about the relationship with the two people who are casting those shadows? Because what I think when I see this, if people are working together, I see them as parallel to each other. So the fact that they're putting them at angles, that makes me think more of conflict. Okay, some more words. I had a little bit of trouble with that one. Bien codo con su pool. So this is slang. So it's not academic language, it's just everyday talk. Oops, sorry. I'm trying to go ahead on mine and I'm going a little bit too far. There we go. Okay, next page, 16. So looking at the pictures again, seeing that sweatband, wristband, usually for wiping sweat away. So I'm thinking hot work. Okay. So this is let me go back to the other one. Mr. Sanchez said, come by tomorrow. I don't want you fellas to track all this dirt into the pool. So, well, we can go home and shower and be back, said Hernando. No, mejor que regresen mañana. Better that you come back tomorrow. I'll be here tomorrow and we can swim after lunch, okay? For sure we'll do it tomorrow, said Mr. Sanchez. Okay, number 3, let's look at this language. Some of the characters switch between English and Spanish. So what can you guess about their community? Do you switch between your home language and English? So communities that do that, English is probably not their first language. The following day he was there, but he headed out right after lunch, and he didn't feel safe leaving us behind without supervision. If one of you drowns, your parents will be angry at me, and he didn't say it, but he didn't need to. One of our parents could sue him, and he needed that like I needed another F in my Geometry 1 class. Or, we figured out later, he could have just said, I used you saps to do my dirty work, and I lied about the pool, suckers. I don't know why we hadn't learned our lesson. Twice before he had gypped us this way on our time and effort. Now, I have to say here, the word that they're used there, that means cheated, and I would never use that word today. It's an ugly word. There are some words that disrespect communities, and that word disrespects the community of gypsies or travelers. So I'm very sorry that this word is in the story. It's an ugly word and shouldn't be used. So let me reread that sentence. Twice before he had cheated us this way of our time and effort, always dangling the carrot in front of our eyes, then snatching it away the last second. So, number 4 is asking us to predict and confirm a prediction. So, which characters will have a conflict? Do you want to change your prediction? Because the first one, I thought maybe he's going to have a fight with the kid. Or maybe Mrs. Sanchez. I didn't realize that Mr. Sanchez was going to be such a big part of the story from reading the very first page when I made predictions about the conflict. So yeah, definitely now I'm going to say he's going to get mad at Mr. Sanchez. One of those times he promised us soft drinks and snacks if we helped clean up a yard across the street from his house. It wasn't even his yard to worry about, but I guess he just didn't like to see the weeds growing as tall as dogs. What if he had company? What would they think? And he was angling for a position on the school board, so he wanted people to vote for him. How could a politico live in such filth? So it sounds like Mr. Sanchez is always scheming and trying to use other people to help him out. But he's not returning that favor. I don't like Mr. Sanchez very much. And, I know people that, I've done things thinking, I'll help them, they can help me. But the part about them helping me doesn't happen. Oh, well, that looks like fun, playing some basketball. Well, we did get a soft drink and chips, we did get a soft drink and chips, only it was a 2-liter bottle of Coke and 1 bag of chips for the 10 of us. We had no cups, and the older, stronger boys got dibs on most of the eats. I didn't know there'd be so many of you, he said. Well, share, and thanks. You are all good, strong boys. The next time was real hard labor. He said, help me dig these holes here. Then we can put up some basketball rims. Once the cement dries on the court itself, you all can come over and play anytime, since it's kind of your court too. That is, if you help me dig the holes. And we did. We dug and dug and dug for close to 6 hours straight until we got done. And we did. We dug and dug and dug for 6 hours straight until we got done, passing on the shovel from one of us to the next. But we got it done. We had our court. Mr. Sanchez kept his word. He reminded us we could come over to play any time, and we took special care not to dunk and grab hold of the rim. Even the shortest kid could practically dunk it because the baskets were so low. But we'd seen the rims all bent down at different yards at school, and we didn't want that for our court. So, let's take a look at our plot and predict here. Mr. Sanchez kept this promise. So do you think that his relationship with Ray will change that? And that's the name. Ray's the name of our narrator. He's saying I, telling the story in first person, but his name is Ray. So when it says to explain, give your reason. And part of the reason can be definitely how you understand it. Has your relationship changed with somebody so you can see a connection? Yeah, I understand because this is what happened to me. Or maybe there's something in the story that gives you a reason. So you can say, monitoring your comprehension, how did Ray's feelings change over time? If somebody promised you something, didn't give it, promised you something else, and did give it, would your feelings change about that person? . to the top. So, predict, will Mr. Sanchez keep his word to the boys who helped him? One day we wanted to play a little 3-on-3, so 3 players on each side. After knocking on different doors several times and getting no answer, we figured the Sanchez family had gone out. We decided that it would be okay to play. We weren't going to do anything wrong. The court was far enough away from the house, we wouldn't possibly break a window. And Mr. Sanchez had said we could come over anytime we wanted. It was our court, after all. Those were his words exactly. A little later in the afternoon, Mr. Sanchez drove up in his truck, honking and honking at us. Here they come. Maybe Orlando and Marty can play with us, someone said. Pues, it was not to be. The truck had just come to a standstill when Mr. Sanchez shot out of the driver's side. He ran up to us, waving his hands in the air like a crazy man, first saying, then screaming, "What are you guys doing here? You all can't be here when I'm not here." Let's take a look now at this plot. An event that makes the conflict worse is called a complication. So what complication happens here? It's our court, but it's not our court. So once again, Mr. Sanchez is changing what he's saying, or he's not doing what he said he'd do. But you told us to come over. Sorry, my iPad's messing up on me. But you told us to come over any time. And we knocked and knocked, and we were being very careful. It doesn't matter. You all shouldn't be here when I'm not home. What if you had broken something? He said. But we didn't, I said. But if you had, then who would have been responsible for paying to replace it? I'm sure every one of you would have denied breaking anything. Este vato, said Hernando. Vato? Is that what you called me? I'm no street punk, no hoodlum. I'll have you know I've worked my whole life, and I won't be called a vato. It's Mr. Sanchez. Got that? And you boys know what? From now on, you are not allowed to come here, whether I'm home or not. You all messed up. You all messed it up for yourselves. You have shown me so much disrespect today. You don't deserve to play on my court. It was a privilege and not a right, and you messed it up. Now leave. So Mr. Sanchez thinks the boys have shown him disrespect. How do you think the boys feel about that? Exactly who is being disrespectful? You think it's possible for adults to disrespect young people? Nobody's perfect. Hernando, who was fuming, said, "Órale, guys, let's go." He took the ball from one of the smaller boys and began to run toward the nearest basket. He slowed down the closer he came to the basket and leapt into the air. I'd never seen him jump with such grace. He floated from the foul line, his long hair like wings, all the way to the basket. He grabbed the ball in both his hands and let go of it at the last moment. Instead of dunking the ball, he let it shoot up into the sky. Then he wrapped his fingers around the rim and pulled down as hard as he could, hanging on for a few seconds. Then the rest of us walked after him, dejected. He hadn't bent the rim even a millimeter. So how does Hernando's reaction to Mr. Sanchez affect the conflict in the story? Eventually, Orly talked us into going back when his dad wasn't home. His baby brother, Marty, was small and slow, and Orly wanted some competition on the court. Today was it for me, though. I made up my mind never to go back to the Sanchez's. You think Ray will keep his promise? What evidence in the text makes you think so? For me, he says, that was it for me. I know sometimes, you'll try and try and try, and then you finally realize this is never going to change. It's time for me to stop. So for me, I think he will keep his word. I walked to the store for a Fanta orange. That and a grape popsicle would cool me down. I sat on the bench outside, finished off the drink, returned the bottle for my nickel refund, and headed for home. So, was your prediction accurate? I thought he wouldn't go back, and he did not. Did you think he'd go back? So, if you did, what happened that you didn't expect? Why did you think he'd go back? So, something new now. Mr. Sanchez needs help again. What will Ray do? What do you think? Make note of your prediction. As soon as I walked through our front door, my mother said, Mijo, you need to go pick up your brother at summer school. He missed the bus. Again? Yeah, he probably missed it on purpose, Ama. He's always walking over to Leo's grocery to talk to his little girlfriends, and then he calls when he needs a ride. I turned toward the bedroom. Come back here, she said. So I turned and took a seat at the table. Have you forgotten the times we had to pick you up? Your brother always went with us, no matter what time it was. Yeah, but I was doing school stuff, football, band. He's in summer school, just piddling his time away. She looked at me as she brushed sweat away from her face with the back of her hand and said, just go pick him up and hurry home. On the way back, stop at Circle 7 and buy some tortillas. There's money on the table. Shook my head in disgust. Here I was, already a senior, having to be my baby brother's chauffeur. So, what do Ray's comments and thoughts tell you about how he feels about helping his brother? How is this feeling similar to his feelings about helping Mr. Sanchez? Think about how you help your family. There are times when you're asked to help and you don't want to do it. Do you do it? Why? Or why not? I'd driven halfway to Leo's grocery when I saw Mr. Sanchez's truck up ahead by the side of the road. I could just make him out sitting under the shade of his truck. Every time he heard a car coming his way, he'd raise his head slightly, try to catch the driver's attention by staring at him. And then he'd hang his head again when the car didn't stop. I slowed down as I approached. Could he tell it was me driving? When he looked up at my car, I could swear he almost smiled, thinking he could be saved. Do you think Ray will stop the car? Add this to your chart. He'd been leaning his head between his bent knees, and I could tell he was tired. His white shirt stuck to him because of all the sweat. His sock on one leg was bunched up at the ankle like a carnation. He had the whitest legs I'd ever seen on a Mexican, whiter than even my dad's. I kept on looking straight. That is, I made like I was looking ahead, not a care in the world. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw that he had a flat tire, that he had gotten two of the lug nuts off but hadn't gotten to the others, that the crowbar lay on his other foot and half on his other foot and half on the ground beside him, that his hair was matted by sweat to his forehead. So, here we have it. Mr. Sanchez needs help again. So how does this add to the conflict between Ray and Mr. Sanchez? There can be a conflict that's outside of the story, physical conflict, and there's also a conflict that can happen inside of a character. So Ray, in thinking, do I help him or don't I help him? That's his inner conflict. I knew that look. I'd probably looked just like that, digging those holes for our basketball court, cleaning up his yard and the one across the street from his house. I wondered if he could use a cold 2-liter Coke right about now. If he was dreaming of taking a dip in his pool. I drove on. No way I was going to help him out again. Let him do his own dirty work for once. He could stay out there and melt in this heat for all I cared. And besides, someone else will stop, I thought. Someone who doesn't know him like I do. And I knew that when Mr. Sanchez got home, he'd stop at my house on his walk around the barrio. My dad would be watering the plants, his evening ritual to relax from a hard day at work. And Mr. Sanchez would mention in passing that I'd probably not seen him by the side of the road, so that's why I hadn't stopped to help him out. Kids today, he would say to my dad. Not a care in the world. Their heads up in the clouds somewhere. My dad would call me out and ask me to tell him and Mr. Sanchez why I hadn't helped a neighbor when he needed it most. So what does Ray imagine about his father? Why I hadn't helped a neighbor out when he helped him the most. So there's a code of behavior in their family. Ray's father expects Ray and others to help the people in their community, because that's probably something that Ray's father does himself and has raised his children to do. So yeah, he would be surprised and maybe a little hurt that his son hadn't done what he expected him to do. So how does this, imagining what his father would expect, how does this add to Ray's inner conflict on not helping Mr. Sanchez? I'd say to both of them, that was you? Oh, I thought you and Orly were in mission, taking care of some business. So it never occurred to me to stop and help a neighbor. Geez, I'm so sorry. Or I could say, I was in such a hurry to pick up my brother in La Jolla that I didn't even notice you by the side of the road. So do you think Ray's imagining this will really take place? Why do you think he thinks it will happen or not? I kind of think he thinks it will happen because he's really working out his explanation. He's preparing for what he could say if this happens. So I think he does think it will happen. So he's given those explanations, and now he says, I'd be off the hook. Anyways, why should I be the one to extend a helping hand when he's done every one of us in the barrio wrong in one way or another? He deserves to sweat a little, a taste of his own bad medicine. Maybe he'll learn a lesson. Because, okay, I got to stop here and say, it's human nature. If somebody does something good to us, we feel ready to do something good for them. But if somebody does something bad to us, a lot of times we hope something bad happens to them. But, so now predict. Ray says, but I remembered the look in his eyes as I drove past him. That same tired look my father had when he'd get home from work and he didn't have the strength to take off his boots. My father always looked like he'd been working for centuries without any rest. He'd sit there in front of the television on his favorite green vinyl sofa chair and stare at whatever was on the TV. He'd sit there for an hour before he could move. That's really tired. He'd sit there for an hour before he could move, before he could eat his supper and take his shower. That same look on his face, Mr. Sanchez had now. What if this were my dad, stranded on the side of the road? I'd want someone to stop for him. My one good deed for today, I told myself. And I'm doing it for my dad, really, not for Mr. Sanchez. I made a U-turn, so he turned the truck around, drove back to where he was still sitting, turned around again, and pulled up behind him. So tell me again, why does Ray make this decision? I thought that was you, Ray, he said. He wiped his forehead with his shirt sleeve. And when you drove past, I thought you hadn't even seen me. Thank goodness you stopped. I've been here close to 45 minutes, and nobody's stopped to help. Thank goodness you did. I just can't get the tire off. Thank my father, I thought. If it weren't for my father, you would still be out here. So you can see he's not happy about what he's doing. He's not happy that he's doing this, but he's saying it to himself, not out loud to Mr. Sanchez. Because if he said it out loud, that would be disrespectful. But, we can't help our feelings. We feel the way we do. So it's interesting. He's doing something he does not want to do, but he's doing it because he feels it's the right thing to do. I had that tire changed in no time. All the while, Mr. Sanchez stood behind me and a bit to my left, saying, Yes, thank God you came by. Boy, it's hot out here. You're a good boy, Ray. You'll make a good man. How about some help there? Mr. Sanchez, all talk. Very little work. No, I've got it, I answered. I'm almost done. Oh, yes, Ray. What if you come over tomorrow night to my house? I'm having a little barbecue for some important people here in town. You should come over. We're even going to do some swimming. What do you say? I tightened the last of the nuts, replaced the jack, the flat tire, and the crowbar in the bed of his truck. Looked at him and said, Thanks. But I'll be playing football with the battles. I like that. I know. It's a little bit rude, just a little rude, but he's throwing Mr. Sanchez's words back to him. So, why does Ray refuse Mr. Sanchez's invitation? What do you think? He has no desire to hang out with this man who keeps breaking his word. Better to hang out with his friends. So, think about these questions here at the end. What does Ray do when Mr. Sanchez needs help at the end of the story? Were you surprised by Ray's response? Explain. And when you explain, take information from the story to use in your answer to make it be a very good explanation, a reflective explanation. Give examples. And vocabulary. Do any of the characters show disrespect in the story? Explain. So find those examples. Now, you can pick a partner to do this, so you could give a friend a call or something, and create a map of the events in this story. So what is the plot? What was the exposition? How did they get it started? Use all those, go back to page 11, I believe it is, to look at the different points in a plot and identify what were the conflicts, what were the complications to the conflict, what's the resolution to this story. And take a look at your prediction chart if you made one. What were some surprises in the story? So go ahead and do those. You can do it orally or in a written way, whatever your teacher tells you to do with the story. Thank you for reading The Good Samaritan with me. Till next time.